So I'm Marta, and I came here to share my story, my journey, how did I transition from academia to product, and maybe to highlight a little bit what are the similarities between the two fields, which might not be that obvious at first glance. So, actually, still here. So, I am a molecular biologist by training. I did a PhD in regenerative medicine and tissue engineering. Well, I really like the field, but eventually I decided to exit academia, and now I work as a product owner at Ada Health for our clinical decision support tool, so for our doctor-facing tool. So those of you who don't know Ada, it's a health tech company here in Berlin, actually not too far away from here, literally around the corner at Adalbertstrasse. And our core application is a chatbot, an AI-based chatbot, Ada, which some of you have already tried or maybe even used. I'm actually curious if anybody used Ada. Okay, really cool. Nice. Yeah, so those of you who don't know about Ada, I will introduce a little bit. So Ada is somebody who you can turn to when you feel unwell, instead of going on Google. This is the screen, so basically once you enter your complaints, your symptoms, Ada takes over the conversation and starts to ask more specifics about those symptoms, and also ask for additional evidence around your symptoms and factors that you may have, to then assess your condition and find out what are the probable conditions behind those symptoms. So you're presented at the end of the dialogue with an assessment report, which has a list of candidate conditions. It also offers you some more description information about those conditions, and also tells you how severe those conditions. So is this something that you probably should seek emergency care with right now? Or is this something that you can manage from home, or just go to the doctor in a few days? We have 8 different levels of this severity. We also offer some guidance to you, so what would be the next step that you should take in order to manage your health, and also provide the ability to track your symptoms, so to see how they evolve over time. And then there is additional information that you can add for yourself about your allergies maybe, or medical history, or some medications that you take in general. The technology behind this product is actually having 2 main pillars. So there is a medical knowledge that was built at Ada throughout years by our in-house medical doctors, and the reasoning engine that was also developed at Ada. So these 2 main pillars form the core technology of the product, which is translated into the chatbot application, the Ada chatbot, and also another product which is facing doctors. It's a clinical decision support tool. As for the company timeline, we've been around for a while. We were founded in 2011, and we spent quite a few years in research, both in reasoning technology as well as medical knowledge. Eventually, in 2016, we launched our chatbot application for iOS devices, and later that year also for Android. And since then, we achieved quite a few milestones. We received funding. We also translated the product to many different languages, and also got registration for medical device class 1. So what's our motivation behind the whole? Ada is inspired by all the so many challenges that the current healthcare system is facing, which essentially boils down to the very sad fact that currently more than half of the population in the world lack access to basic healthcare. Besides lacking access to healthcare, healthcare is also facing a crisis in efficiency and accuracy. The root of this problem is threefold that I will slowly list. One of them is staffing challenges. There is shortage of medical doctors worldwide, and I'm not only talking about developing countries, but also the US. I don't know if you know, but the expected shortage of medical doctors will reach as high as 120,000 by 2030. And there is also shortfall of nurses in countries like UK, Germany, France, and the Netherlands. So this eventually results in the burnout and stress of those who are working beyond their capacity, which also results in some mistakes that can be even fatal, and the inefficiency of the system. The other problem that I would like to maybe mention is the rare disease challenge. So rare disease is a disease that affects less than 1 person out of 2,000 people, which implies that it's a rare condition. However, there are around 5,000 to 7,000 rare conditions worldwide, which adds up to affecting 30 million people only in Europe and above 500 people worldwide. So rare diseases are actually common. So this is the paradox in between. The problem with them is that they are really hard to diagnose because a single doctor cannot encounter that many rare disease cases in their life of each rare diseases that they could recognize it just as they do with a common cold, from the door. These conditions are also often hiding behind the symptoms of common conditions, and they can also manifest very differently in the different patients. So it's really hard to understand them at first. This results in patients who suffer from a rare condition to have this odyssey in the healthcare system. So it takes 5 to 7 years to get the right diagnosis for patients suffering from one of the rare conditions. Of course, you can imagine this is not only a lot of patient suffering, but a lot of cost and, again, inefficiency. And the last piece to it is the rapid pace the medical knowledge grows. So in the 1950, the expected time to double the medical knowledge was 50 years. By 2020, this will be 75 days. And I think this is crazy. No human being can keep up with this growth of medical knowledge. But machines can, so machines could help in here. So all these challenges and problems from the healthcare system resulting in over 4 billion people lacking access to basic healthcare, millions of people are being misdiagnosed yearly, and 90% of the people go to Google to inform themselves and to try to take action about their health. So this is why we think at ADA we can help. And the way we imagine that is to put our AI-based chatbot application in the hands of patients to receive a more accurate and more personalized assessment, to then, having that information, can take control over their health. The other piece is helping doctors with the diagnosis. So our clinical decision support tool in the hands of doctors can suggest them certain conditions and support them during their clinical decision making and maybe help with the misdiagnosis. Combining the two, we hope to cover the patient journey and also facilitate the patient-doctor interaction, so to have that efficacy as well. So now to me, how did I find ADA and how do I fit at ADA? How did I arrive to ADA? So as I mentioned, I am from very much of a scientific background. I studied molecular biology. I've been training for years and years to acquire very specific techniques and skill sets that allow me to do research in a laboratory. So I was working, just to give you a little bit more context, I was working with cells and molecules and using microscopes and pipettes to carry out my studies. And the work was around understanding how cells behave in a human cartilage in the knee when patients are suffering from osteoarthritis. The goal of the work was actually really nice, and also my motivation was to help people, to understand better the whole situation and put out some work there that can make their life better. Maybe just creating a small piece of puzzle that will, in a bigger picture, be a useful set of information. So I started the university in Hungary, then I continued a PhD in Portugal. And for years and years, I've been in a lab doing that research. So, hundreds and hundreds of samples and many data that were pointing to all directions. Eventually I decided that this is not for me. And not because the project wasn't exciting. It was exciting. And the project was beautiful as well. So cells can be really beautiful under the microscope. I enjoyed that part as well. And I also thought that the overall goal is really nice. But what I didn't like is the whole system around it. I just found that it's just too slow for me. So what happens in academia right now, actually, from my perspective, and you can challenge me in that, but you are working very long hours. You often find yourself in silo, and you are able to gather a lot of data that maybe sometimes it's even makes sense and it confirms your hypothesis, and then you get to publish it. But once you published it, which might be a year or 2 year story, did you make an impact? Did you contribute to something? So this self-doubt is always there, and it's always following you that, are you helping anybody? And I found that this feedback loop is just too long, it's too slow for me. So I didn't feel that I'm actually being useful with my work, with my many hours. So I thought I'm gonna just try something else. Nevertheless, I still wanted to do something where I have my freedom of creativity and I can think and ask questions and criticize and create, but hopefully impacting also somebody's life, being closer to the beneficiary of my work. So I realized that actually this is how I arrived to startup, first as a research associate, but then I soon realized that I want to go for product. And this was not an obvious decision while I was still in academia, but it was actually a very organic process to arrive there. And the reason why is because there is a lot of parallels in between, and the script is very similar. So probably you know this very much because this is like high school level, but a scientific research method has the following steps. There is an observation you have, or an idea. You ask a question about it, form a hypothesis, and then you make some predictions. And you want to see whether your predictions are correct or not. So then you test it. You probably set up a very controlled environment where you can set that, test that prediction, and then you have results. And the results either confirm your hypothesis or reject. If they reject, then you go back, you optimize your method maybe, or you change your hypothesis and you do it again, and you do it again and again. And I think this script is very much true also for product development. Okay, I don't think that this script is the only similarity actually between academia and product development. There is many aspects of a startup environment and the scientific environment. For example, the extreme level of uncertainty. When you're creating something incredible with a very low budget, that's something very challenging. But also, neither the scientific research or a product development can work without asking the right questions, setting up the right environment to test those questions, making good predictions, and also conducting research and continuously validating your learnings. I think this is somehow very similar in both aspects. Of course, this is not the only thing. So becoming a product manager, you have to have many, many skills. But again, I think in academia, there is quite a few skills that you can gain and then leverage in product development. And I'm going to just list a few that I find actually very much true for both. So if you have been in academia or product, you are probably prepared to fail. So what I experienced in my academic years is, that I set up my experiments, long hours again, months and months of experimentation, sample collection, and well, not much of an outcome. So then I optimize, I go back, and I do it again and again and again. I think in product it's very similar. You cannot expect that users receive well your very first MVP, or maybe they do, but you probably have to go back again and optimize it until you have the final product ready and successful. You are able to think critically if you are from academia, and that's very much needed also when you do a product development or building a business. You should be observative, you should always see what's around, and you should always question all of it. You shouldn't just take it granted that somebody's opinion or research paper that you read. You have to evaluate that for yourself and take what's important for you and what's relevant for you. You're also able to assimilate new information, which is quite similar to the previous talk. But what I mean in here is that just because you had an idea at the beginning and you think you are right, you shouldn't ignore the facts around it. As you move on with either product development or your research study, you should be able to see how people react in your surrounding, what is the status quo? Is the status quo changing around you? What your peers are doing? What are your competitors are doing? Assimilate the information and use it for your benefit. Again, whether you do research or product development. And you know the importance of data. So there is no research publication being published without bulletproof set of data. And neither you should ignore data when you have a, let's say, mobile application when you can track your events and understand how users behave, or any other data when you do a product development, because that can tell you a lot, and you should consider that as you move on with your development process. And you're able to prioritize. So for product, it's very easy. We're constantly prioritizing our backlog as there is new information coming in. And also in research, if you cannot prioritize your task, you probably won't be able to perform your research studies. In biology, it's even more restricted because we have cells, and cells, they grow and behave no matter what you do, whether it's Christmas or you want to go for holiday. They just, living on. And also there is very much restriction with your biochemical reactions. You cannot rush that. It's not like you have a dinner and you want to be there. That's going to take as much as it needs to take. So considering all these, you have to have a very, very precise prioritization of your task in order to succeed with your essays. And you see the big picture. So when you fail so many times, when you feel like you're losing it, that it just doesn't go anywhere, you still remind yourself that why are you there? What was the first thing that made you to arrive to that spot, whether you do research or start to do product development? You keep your eye on the ball and you move on and do everything that's needed to be done in order to achieve that. So I'm not trying to say that if you've been in academia, then you know it all and you can just apply for product management. It's not true, unfortunately. There is a lot of things that you have to learn. When I started in software development, I had no idea what was, API and what software architecture. And today we are very much talking about it every day. So I need to learn all this additional knowledge. And not only those, there are many skills that I need to acquire in order to be good in my product ownership role. And I didn't have that or didn't need that in research. I guess it's just about motivation at the end. So when people ask me if it was worth for me to leave academia, I can only answer this from my very subjective position. It's very much true for me, my personality, and my journey. For me, it was absolutely worth it because, which I mentioned earlier, that there is this very long, very slow feedback loop in academia, and you're always in doubt whether you're worth anything or your product or research result worth anything. That is something that in here is much more effective because we receive daily user feedback that are, in our cases, quite nice, and those are really assuring that we are on the right path, and it's really a confirmation for me that, okay, it makes sense to continue this work, and this just gives me the thrill and the kick to move on and do what I do. So for this reason, I definitely am thinking that I'm in the right place, and I very much enjoy to be in academia or in product management instead of in academia. Jesus Christ. And this is it.
Thank you so much for leaving academia and being here. Who has questions at the very back?
Hello. So first of all, thank you for sharing back to the community. I have a question. How do you treat privacy data?
Hi, it's Adam. Okay. What do you mean exactly about how do we treat privacy data? How is our architecture set up?
So you know that it's a hot and current topic,
yeah.
And laws and legislations are literally changing by the minute, probably. In each and every country, different. It's a bit of a gray area. What's your mantra when it comes to privacy and user data? How do you treat that?
Okay, so I mentioned earlier that we are medical device class 1, right? And we are also ISO regulated, and since being in the healthcare sector, we have the most sensitive
Harsh
data there
treatment,
is.
yeah.
So we try to comply with everything, and our whole architecture and data handling is set up in a way that it qualifies to the compliance and GDPR and everything that has to be. Do you want more details on it? Because then probably I'm not the right person to tell everything.
I'm sure. I just wondered, as a product manager, whether you actually have something that would actually summarize your treatment. How do you actually treat data? Does it feed back into research or whatever?
Well, I can really tell that. So we handle completely separately whatever there is a personal data, personal information that could identify the user from the medically relevant information that the user enters in the app for their health assessment purposes. So this is completely decoupled, and there is no way of having the two exposed to third parties or whoever would hack us. And we are GDPR compliant. We couldn't exist otherwise. And yeah.
Cool, thank you.
Questions? Okay.
I like asking questions. So, as a hypochondriac, I'm somebody who Googles symptoms a lot.
Yeah.
And so I often wind up on WebMD or on Mayo Clinic or something like that. And one thing that I know is that, you'll Google something like I don't know, why am I tired all the time? And a lot of times you'll get to a thing that says, oh, you probably just need to rest, or maybe you need some vitamins, or it could be a tumor, or it could be diabetes, and all of these things. But to know this, you need to go and get this tested or this tested, and you need to see a doctor. So how is Ada going to improve on that beyond telling me just, oh, actually, you know what, you need to test this for sure and go see a doctor?
Yeah, very good question. So, as I mentioned, we've been working for years and years on our knowledge base as well as reasoning engine to have the combination of the two that can provide you a quite accurate result. So if you try our application, it's actually a dialogue in between you and Ada. So first you enter your complaints, like you would do it in Google, but then Ada takes it over and she starts to ask relevant questions. And what I mean by relevant questions is anything that is related close enough to your complaints that can, so the next piece of information should be enough in order to us to reuse the candidates, and then we move on to reuse the candidates from all the millions of conditions that there are to then come up with, hopefully, the most accurate assessment by asking many, many questions from you. So other findings, specifications around the findings, factors that you may suffer from, like are you a smoker or are you pregnant? And considering everything around this, our reasoning engine can make sense of it to then only offer you conditions that are true for the whole dialogue and not only for your first 3 symptoms that you entered.
I have a question. So, I mean, health is also a lot about communication, how you communicate these things. Do you have a policy or a guideline how you communicate, like, for example, really bad diagnoses?
Yeah, it's also a good question. So I showed you earlier that we have an assessment report after the dialogue. So that's where we show the candidate conditions. We don't filter there out if you have a severe condition. We inform you, but neither we are a diagnostic app. It's just suggestion or like assessment on your health condition based on what you entered and based on what you answer to our questions. If that's something really bad, we have an advice level to say like, okay, this is something you really should see a doctor with, and we advise you to do so, but we don't tell you the ultimate truth because we only have the users, the patient's insights. So then there is another piece to it, right? All the medical insights, the tests that a medical doctor can do, and the signs that only a medical doctor can see and interpret. So you always have to then go to a doctor with a severe condition.
Questions?
Hey, thanks for
Hi.
your talk. What's the business model behind Ada? Sorry for the sparring question.
Yeah, so our consumer application, the Ada chatbot, is B2C and it's freely available. So as I mentioned, there is lack of access to healthcare worldwide, and that would be really bad if we would ask money for it, right? So we really want to provide this piece of information, this personalized health assessment to everybody freely. I don't know if you heard recently, actually it was a few months ago already, we partnered with TK. So that's a B2B model there behind that. It's not the patient who's gonna pay for the assessment, but it's also relevant for the whole healthcare system, and in this case is the insurer for whom we can actually help as well, and it's worth for them to pay us to help for that.
So when I'm insured by TK, I can use your product and TK reimburses the money, so to say?
To you?
No, to you. So I use it for free and you get the money from the Krankenkasse?
I cannot tell you exactly how we are being paid by TK. Unfortunately, I don't have that information.
Right. No worries. Cheers.
Just additional question to that, because you're working on a doctor interface,
Yes,
right?
that's my product.
So how does that differ from user B2C app?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
And how specific actually diagnoses go there in the doctor interface?
Yeah. So again, the clinical decision support or the doctor-facing application is a support tool for the doctor. So the last call also has to be made by the doctor, and we just suggest them. We present him all that or her, all that information that we have and the evidence points to. It's very different from the app in both user interface and also some of the functionalities, because the end user is a medical professional, so we can be more transparent and provide more freedom for the user, so to say. So there is, for example, no question flow guidance, but we just let the user to enter all the findings and evidence that there is in the case of the patient's file, and then see what are the conditions that ADA suggests. And then the doctor can either accept or reject those, what he chooses or she chooses for a working diagnosis. We also provide different scoring system there to be able to screen for not only the most probable, not only to the most probable conditions based on probability, but also what's the best fit. This way we can screen very effectively rare conditions as well in the tool. So this gives another insight for the doctor. And yeah, it's also in the app, but we visualize the contribution of the evidence to the probability of a condition. So there is this interaction between evidence and condition, which is essentially a very transparent view on our reasoning. And that's something that the doctors really like, because they can say whether ADA was thinking right or ADA was not thinking right, because that's really mimics how we were reasoning at the back. But it's visible for them.
But that's used like in triage of patients in the emergency room or something like that, or?
No, it's not a triage tool. It's a diagnostic support tool, so it's after triage.
Okay.
But this is something that we're also looking into, actually, because we could be good there as well.
Okay, I come to you probably.
A few over here.
Thank you. So I was wondering what will happen, for example, if I go to the app and then I start inputting my information, and then you say, oh yeah, you have a call, and then the next day I die because of a bad assessment.
It's really unfortunate for you.
So I guess you have like a bunch of lawyers in the company for that. I don't know, what would you do in that situation?
Yeah, I mean, I really hope it's not going to happen to anybody. For this, thing number one, we are trying to be really accurate. So we work really hard on our accuracy, which is actually right now, it's quite good. So I would say it cannot happen. But also, we are not diagnosing you. We're just giving you an assessment based on what you entered. And again, if that's a severe condition there, you should seek a doctor's help. If we happen to tell you that it wasn't a severe condition and you die, well, that's really unlikely. But again, legally, we hadn't diagnosed you and we hadn't stopped you from going to a doctor. You know, it's really just for your own information.
Hi, if I may. How do you measure the accuracy of your predictions? Meaning, do you incorporate a feedback loop? How do you do that?
So we do many different ways to ensure that our accuracy is good. Number one thing, when our doctors model a certain condition, they test it against textbook cases, so how a perfect case would look like on that condition, but also take real-life cases and test against those, see how it performs. This is our very first step, internal testing. Then we also work with doctors who test the cases for us. So they are our peers, but they are outside and working in our in hospitals, so they are not ADA employees, and they test our cases there and tell us if something doesn't work well. If a user would happen to have an inaccurate assessment, we also provide a loop there for them to then confirm or say otherwise. So we ask them after, when they did an assessment and they return to ADA, we ask them like, okay, can we talk about your, I don't know, migraine case or headache case? Have you seen a doctor? You know, did you really have, do you feel bad? Do you feel better now? And we try to incorporate the data also to improve. So if we receive a bad, then we also have feedback. So this is like one in-tool feedback system, and we also have the feedback where users can leave us actually free text. So in any case, if we see that there was a case going wrong, then our doctor's team already immediately jump on it and see what could go wrong and correct that.
I'm going to take two more questions, one here and one at the front.
Hello.
Hi.
It's Manu. So I wonder if you have seen the House TV show.
Dr. House?
Yeah, Dr. House.
I have to say I hadn't followed very much, but I know what you mean.
Yeah, I guess my question is about how the app works, that you have to make questions to the patient, right? And they always lie, or that's what the fiction says. Like the patient always is lying, right?
The patients are lying?
Yeah, about the symptoms and everything.
To Dr. House?
I guess, yeah, I wonder how, if in the design of the product you have thought about that, like how to make best questions to prevent or try to really know what you know what I mean? Like
yeah, very good question, yeah. Are you a mathematician or No.
No.
Okay, so our reasoning team, they are mathematicians and computer scientists, very, very smart guys. So they actually created the question flow that just because you said no to something, we always have means to actually double check and triple check to really be able to exclude that piece of evidence from the flow, to not to consider, if that's, especially if that's something relevant. Now, if something points to a very severe condition, yeah, so we also have a certain phase in the question flow when we really screen for the severe conditions to not to have the previously mentioned situation. But also we have several loops in this question flow for these kind of security reasons.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It was here, right? Yeah.
So you mentioned as a product owner, you learned more about API and software architecture.
Finally, a question about me.
So how did it help your team actually knowing more about this topic?
That I know more about this topic? I mean, obviously, they are really relieved. So I have to say I have an amazing team of engineers and designer who is here today. And they are really patient and teaching me a lot and explaining me everything. So I think I'm a fast learner, so I pick up things. They can contradict me on this, but it's definitely for my and the product benefit if I know more and if I can, grasp everything quicker. If that was the question?
Thanks.
Yeah, okay. And I also have externals whom I always ask about, like my brother, and I read the articles to then have that knowledge to not to be too slow on the refinement sessions.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry for everyone who couldn't ask their question right here, but not mine. It's always good when it's not mine. No, but you're going to stick around a bit longer. And thanks so much, Marta. Thank you so much.